listen to executive session.
You can serve as, we do have a quorum in that manner. As usual, why don't we just go around the room and introduce ourselves? Start on my left with you, Lance.
Lance Lam, DDOE. Joe Andronico, screen.
Dan Wedderburn, I'm the council chair's representative.
Teresa Lawrence, DDOE.
Keith Anderson, DDOE.
Donna Cooper, Pep Job.
Bernice McIntyre, Washington Gas.
Laurie Martin, Sierra Club.
Karen Sistrunk, Office of the People's Council. Terry Lutz, Petrochet.
Ivan Smirian, OPC. Marcus Walker, DCSU.
Hussein Karim, DDOE.
Lenora Hall, DDOE.
George Nichols, DCSEU.
Heather Green, DCSU. Lawrence Computer, Kayla. Nicole C. Robin.
Ted Trabue, DCSEU. Good morning.
Morning.
Muhammad Ali, DDOE Finance.
Let's the Jersey Institute of Marketing Transformation.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to turn your attention to the agenda and ask that the board members please review it so that we could approve it or make any changes as you see fit.
I move we approve the agenda.
I second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The agenda is thereby approved. I would now like to turn your attention to the minutes, meeting minutes for Monday, May 5th, 2014. I would ask that the board members please review it for any updates if needed.
It's nothing monumental, but one of the things that I had asked for during that meeting was the status of the audit report, annual audit report. I don't think that was reflected in the minutes.
Yeah, I think we also talked about whether there was possible for the financial auditor to be present today, and apparently that's not possible, but...
No, it wasn't. We did look into that, and they were not able to make it today. But I do plan to have them available at the next meeting.
Right, but we just may want to put in the minutes that
Exactly.
discussion, since my recall is as well that we talked about that.
We will update that accordingly. Yes.
I don't know if it's permissible for me to offer a comment on the minutes, but if it is, I'd like to offer one.
Is it what?
If it's permissible for me to offer any comments on the minutes, I don't know if it's only allowed for board members.
I don't see that as being a problem. If you have any comments, please.
Okay. On page 3, at, where it says T12 program, I guess, the third paragraph after that, where it says Ms. McIntyre, which starts off referencing Ms. McIntyre, and then it says Ms. Madabu Fry asked if all the contractors for ICDI were CBEs, and it says that I said no. Um, in fact, they are all CBEs in that program.
Do you know whether you said no?
I don't recall, but I know.
Right.
That's why I'm just reading
right.
through this very quickly now, and I know that they're all CBEs in that particular program.
So
But
check the
it would
record.
surprise me that I'd answered no.
Right, check the record on that.
Yeah, I'd have to.
And I just wanted to correct that if, in fact, I had misstated something at our last meeting.
We will note that, and I think it may be prudent for us to go back and listen to the tape to see what the answer was.
Right.
And then we will correct that for the record.
Point of order with regard to the March 18th meeting minutes. If you recall from the last board meeting, we planted on approving them because we wanted to go back to the tape to check on the issue regarding the hearing on abolishing the SEU advisory board. So when we went back to the tape, we found that Keith did not, speak about the number of people who were opposed to the abolishment of the board. So the March 18th minutes were not edited to reflect that since it didn't happen. What we did do in the May 5th meeting minutes was indicate that, this discussion was indicated, and I think Ms. Manu Fry said, she wanted to note that the People's Council, that they're on the record in saying that they gave comments at the hearing. So all of that discussion is reflected in the May 5th minutes, but we didn't actually amend the March 18th minutes. So those minutes on March 18th still need to be approved by the board.
If I may comment, two things. Seeing the discussion on the fifth minutes that we're looking at now, and secondly, realizing and remembering that actually Keith and I had that discussion after the meeting was over. I have no problem with what you just said.
Okay. So is there a motion on the floor to approve the minutes for March 18th?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any that opposed? So March 18th minutes are hereby adopted. Is there a motion on the floor to adopt the minutes for May 5th, 2014
I think you were.
with Donna's update
Oh, no,
regarding
you
the
didn't
financial
move that, right?
audit
I didn't, not yet.
and Ted's update on his answer to the CBE question of, what is it, ICDI?
I had one question.
Okay.
Under the discussion that ensued regarding the number of witnesses who testified and the number that supported or were opposed to abolishing the board, was that determined that it was 43 people that did testify and 42 were opposed? Is that accurate?
Right, that's the conversation we were having. There was no mention of the number of people who were actually opposed to it at the board meeting.
I can respond to that too, because on my memory, sometimes gets better when you go to the other page. It is true that there was a witness list of 43 people, and of the better, correct way of saying it, I should have was that of those organizations and individuals who testified, only one supported the administration's position. Period. I'm not asking for any changes, but that's a better, more correct statement. Does that make sense what I said?
I wasn't at the last meeting, but I believe, wasn't it that only one person opposed that part of the legislation versus only one person supported it.
No, only one person supported it, and that was the administration. Wait a minute. Only one person supported the legislation of those organizations and individuals who testified and brought up this issue. They all opposed abolishing the report.
Okay, I mean, I, for one, don't see how that this conversation is germane to the topics today or any other topics that we are on the agenda. What I am amenable to do is provide a list of the folks who testified on that day, if that would be helpful to some board members.
No, it was just whether or not the actual minutes reflected what I was questioning what Dan actually stated
Okay.
at the last meeting. So is that accurate?
So, no, it is not accurate.
Okay.
So, what is accurate that 43 people testified. The amount of people who are opposed or not opposed it's undetermined at this point.
Well, it is determined of those who oppose, only one opposed.
Well, that
All
stands
42
for...
people didn't mention the subject.
Correct.
That's the
No,
issue.
because we had some people from the diesel industry and several
didn't-
other industries
didn't touch on
who
this
didn't
issue.
opine on that issue
Right.
at all.
Right.
I don't know what that number is,
Okay,
quite
that's-
frankly.
Excuse me, just to put on, John Misrock said he went to the wrong building. He was going to participate by phone. Is there a phone in here?
We don't have that
No.
capability today in this room.
Okay.
So that number is undetermined at this point.
So we have motion to approve the minutes before us?
Is
that
there
where we
one?
are? I'll vote to approve the minutes.
I'll
Of
second.
May 5th.
Okay, is there any, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any that oppose? These minutes are approved. Thank you. At this point, I will turn things over to Ms. Terry Lutz of Tetra Tech, who will go over the evaluation, measurement, and verification final report.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, the audience.
Good morning.
So I guess it's been about 2 months since I was here in March and presented some preliminary results of the progress of the DCSEU towards its goals and performance benchmarks for fiscal year 13. And today it's really just a summary and presentation of the final results. There's not a lot of difference, but we'll talk through a little bit more detail some of the findings and recommendations that we made as a part of our effort. And we'll also take a look at kind of a comparison between fiscal year 13 and 12. We haven't done that a whole lot, at least with the performance benchmark in March, along with talking about some strengths that we found through the evaluation effort this last go around, and some improvement opportunities. And along with that, then as I mentioned before, some recommendations. And finally, I do want to talk about some of our evaluation strategies for fiscal year 14. All right, so I don't expect folks to be able to read this from the back. So really, I think the important part is taking a look at the color coding. So the green color coding are achievements, and the orange color coding are areas where the DCSU did not achieve the benchmark. And this slide also presents not only the minimum target, but also the performance target. So you can get an idea for fiscal year 13 at the performance benchmark level how the DCSU performed. So if you'll notice, for the megawatt hours, the minimum benchmark was achieved, whereas the performance target was not. And then at the gas side, the minimum was not achieved, so of course the performance benchmark was not either. Increasing the renewable energy generating capacity, this year was a change. If you remember, last year it was to deliver a cost-effective program. This year it was to reduce the costs associated with delivering that program within the district. And the performance target was 20, the minimum was 10, but the DCSU actually did quite well in reducing those costs and reduced them by 83%. So both benchmarks, both the performance target and the minimum were achieved with that particular benchmark. For the growth in peak demand, the performance target was not achieved, but the minimum was. And moving on down, improving the energy efficiency of the low-income housing, the 30% spend. The verified for the minimum target was achieved, whereas the performance benchmark was not. The next is the energy, the growth of the energy demand of the largest users, which hasn't yet been defined. And then finally, the green jobs. So if you'll note, neither one of those benchmarks were achieved. Now, this is a fiscal year 13 snapshot. And again, notice the green. And real quickly, I wanted to just bring up how it looked in fiscal year 12. So definitely some improvements, if you'll notice, between the 12 and 13 in the achievement of the different benchmarks. So here in 12, the achievement was at the peak, the benchmark 3, the reduction in the growth peak demand, and the energy efficiency income housing spending. Whereas, again, when we look at 13, there's much more achievement across the board. So some of the key findings and recommendations on our performance benchmark, in addition to doing our evaluation of the performance of the different tracks and doing the impact assessment to verify reported results, as well as some process and attribution study analysis, we also took a look at the individual performance benchmarks and read through the page report from September of last year to get an idea of what some of those recommendations were and how the evaluation team felt about those in light of some of our efforts for 12 and then into 13. So reducing the per capita energy consumption, one of the recommendations from the page report was really we need to do some additional analysis. We're only a couple years into the effort, and based on their scope of work for that particular effort, they weren't really able to fully quantify or qualify those benchmarks, but they do recommend some additional analysis be done. And really, as the DCSU progresses and more data is available for that analysis and that assessment, I think it will become possible to better quantify or at least better qualify the impacts of the different performance benchmarks in conjunction with other contractual obligations as they relate to what reasonable targets might be, both on the electric and the gas side. One of the efforts, in fact, that the evaluation team is doing as a part of fiscal year 14 strategies is to do a better or a more detailed assessment of what the costs have been for the DCSEU in 12, 13, and halfway into now 14, to get an idea of what we might be able to quantify as far as contractual obligations and how they might impact the spend of acquiring energy efficiency resources within the district, as well as to identify where we might have gaps in data that could be collected so that further analysis in support of the page report recommendation could be done in the future. So the first effort is really to kind of scope out what do the costs look like, what data do we have, what is able to be quantified or qualified from that data set, and then what makes sense for us to look into further, and what additional data would be required for us to be able to study further, what some of those interactions might be to provide the DDOE, the DCSU, and the board members and the public with that information about, what are the costs within the DCU? How does doing business within the district relate and cause interactions and then therefore costs between the 6 performance benchmarks and their contractual obligations? It's really just trying to get a better understanding about what it means so that ultimately we have a good understanding of what truly can be acquired within the district based on the budgets that are available. The next is measuring the progress towards the MCF targets without inclusion of the interactive effects for the installation of more efficient lighting. This was not a page report recommendation. This is an evaluator recommendation. And the reason why we say this is that when you look across the United States, we have not been able to find an example where other program administrators are held to a gas target that that reduces what they're able to claim by those interactive effects. So this really is an anomaly. If the DDOE believes that we should include those interactive effects, which does make the analysis, and really truly it's a better reflection of what's going on, then setting the target should consider the fact that there will be those interactive effects. And just off a quick assessment of looking at the interactive effects for fiscal year 13, it was about 30,000 MMBTUs or MCFs roughly. And when you look at the accomplishment on the gas side, if the 50,000 roughly verified savings, that would add more than another 50%. So you'd be up to 80. So you're getting much closer to achieving the targets, although not there yet. But it is an additional barrier that is required of the DCSU to overcome when you reduce the reported savings by those interactive effects. And I'm assuming everyone here understands the interactive effects. And then finally, one of the other pieces of information that could really help go a long way into informing the reasonableness of targets or setting reasonable targets, in addition to what there is to spend, is, well, what is the actual potential within the district? And I do understand that the potential study has been conducted, and that can certainly help inform. But what also I think would be helpful to calibrate that potential study, as well as to provide the DCSU with information that they could use to help base their programs and their designs and portfolios on, is calibrating and conducting a baseline study for the district. So getting a much better understanding of what actually exists in the district on the electric and the gas side.
Is the baseline study the comprehensive energy plan?
No, the potential study was done in the CEP. We need to do a baseline study for the district.
Is that something the DDOE would do?
We have been exploring the options, but quite frankly, a baseline study is a pretty expensive study to conduct, and DDOE is still trying to obtain funds to be able to do such a study. We plan on having discussions with the utilities to see if it would be something the utilities might be interested in contributing to, because it can help inform future programming and activities also for the utilities. I can tell you off the top of my head that last year the district did a potential a baseline study. We've searched and we really don't have one in our records, so to speak. So I think it's long overdue that the district needs to have a baseline study conducted.
Two things on that. Would the baseline study be different than when the law was passed? It used 2009 consumption as the base.
Yes.
Yes. And that's current. So would this be going back and really verifying what the 2009 base was, or would it be current? I mean, what's the recommendation? Maybe I should, the evaluators recommending the baseline study.
Well, those are two different things. So
Yes.
what we're recommending here for the baseline study is that you do an assessment of what current technologies actually exist within the district. So what measures have district residents and businesses already adopted on the energy efficiency level, and then what is still, what is all the old equipment that's still out there that has potential to be replaced. And to Lance's point, he mentioned...
Which is different than what consumption was in...
Right.
This baseline study is something different, because I was thinking at the commission, in our order, in the last distribution rate case, we did ask for load research to be done. Now, I won't say more than that because that's under reconsideration, but it is something that the commission expressed interest in getting an up-to-date load profile study for electricity, which would be more, it would be an appliance saturation study and a load by rate class, by category of customer.
In fact, that's what I was going to say. Lance had mentioned about working with the utilities. I know when I was at the utility, we often conducted the saturation study research, and that is research that can certainly be leveraged for a baseline study.
And that has not been done in a long time. But I just wanted to make you aware, particularly Lance, if you're looking for funding, we do have an order out to do that. It is being reconsidered, so I'm not sure where it'll end up final, but that's for electricity consumption only.
Are there any other questions on this slide? Alrighty, so one of the others was the increasing the renewable energy generating capacity and conducting a cost assessment study. So if you recall from the Page report, they concluded that there are a lot of costs associated with delivering renewable programs that are outside the DCSU control, and that's certainly true. I mean, the cost of equipment is what the cost of equipment is. And I don't think the DCSU has the leverage to negotiate much lower prices, given that the volumes aren't, what we consider large. So they suggest that really a cost assessment study be conducted to really more fully understand what is possible. But then also, I think from the evaluator perspective, and I mentioned that we are doing a more detailed assessment of the DCSU costs, is there is certainly the uncontrollable part, but then there is the administrative part that is certainly well within the DCSU's possibility to control and manage. But as you see, when we looked at the slides of the performance benchmarks, they really did quite well in reducing those costs. So they are certainly moving and managing those costs much more effectively in the second year. And I think that's really to be expected. The first year, really is truly a startup year. There's a lot of cost associated with just getting up and running and figuring out the complexities of operating within a new area. So I think really kudos for such a great reduction there. I think that certainly demonstrates the point that there are costs that can be controlled, and that the DCS has been able to demonstrate that ability.
Can I ask a question on that too? Maybe ask Keith. There was a project going on, I think it was DDOE and CRA, about permitting costs and streamlining permitting costs and reducing costs particularly for solar installations, but for others too. Would that figure into here? Of course, that's outside of the SEU, but...
Yes, it would be part of reducing the costs. Permitting fees from DCRA has been pretty much all over the spectrum, so to speak. You could have two different contractors going in with the same system size and paying different permitting fees. I think DCRA right now is on course to standardize permitting fees for all solar systems, so to speak, at a much lower rate than what folks have been used to paying.
And that was what was reflected in the Budget Support Act, that reduction?
Yes, part of that is in the
Okay.
Budget Support Act.
All right, so then the next is reducing the growth in peak demand. I think folks realize that DCSU, actually without doing a lot of extra work, has been able to achieve that benchmark. There is demand reduction to be recognized as a part of delivering energy efficiency programs. So that has been a fairly, at least the minimum benchmark has been fairly easy for the DCSU to achieve. But I think some of the other things that we can start thinking about at this point would be engaging PJM in discussions about what and how the DDOE and the DCSU could go about bidding in those energy efficiency resources into the capacity markets for PJM. There is a revenue stream there to be had, and the DCSU has been in operation for 3 years-ish, given at the end of this fiscal year. So I think that there's probably sufficient data to support a good forecast about what to expect going forward. And like I said, that could be a revenue opportunity. I think what would be important, though, would be understanding the PJM market complexities. It is complex, and having a good handle on what the requirements are certainly is important. It's been a few years since I've been involved with the capacity markets, and there have been many changes. So it's something that does require assessment. So I think our recommendation would be that, if this is revenue that the DCSU, the DDOE, or the district is interested in seeing, let a business case be put together that considers what the clearing prices have been going in the forward markets over the last couple of years. I think PEPCO cleared at about quite 120 megawatt per day in the last auction for 16, 17, I believe. So there's definitely some things there to think about. Now there are, of course, constraints to consider how to work around. There's the annual contractual obligation that the DCSU enters into with the DUE. So there definitely needs to be some thought to think through how to get around some of that. But I do know that, at least in the past, PJM has been more than happy to meet and present and have those discussions on how people can participate in the market. So I would encourage folks to maybe start thinking about how to engage in that discussion.
So I would just like to add my standard rejoinder for the record, and that is we also have University of DC, we have DC Water, we have Department of General Services. There are a lot of other parts of the district government that are conserving energy, And we should, when we think about this, we should at least think about what the prospect would be for doing a district-wide bid into PJM as opposed to only the SCU. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the right thing to do. I'm just saying it should be a thought when we consider this.
Yeah, I think I agree that could certainly be part of the discussion. There would be joint risks then, because, bidding into the market isn't a given. There are certain risks associated with that. So you'd have to think about how
Sure.
those risks would be shared, but
Right.
then also how the opportunities and how the benefits could be shared.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be also important to find out who's already doing that, because many of those entities are probably already doing it through their retail supplier of bidding. Some of them have already contracts there. So I think it'd be useful to get the whole picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually a question, not just to you, but to Betty Ann and even Keith. I was at a Deloitte Energy Conference last week, and utilities were first and foremost. A lot of people think they're a big inflection point for utilities. That some people are going, utilities are in a death spiral.
Hear that again.
Other people are going, they need to participate in terms of next generation. I mean, part of what we're talking about here is the bigger picture of what we're talking about, particularly vis-a-vis the district, is what our opportunities are here vis-a-vis combined heat and power, microgrids. What can the district do to our weaknesses? We have no factories or whatever. Our strengths are we've got an incredibly strong worker base, the government, whatever. And I'm just wondering if what you're talking about isn't looking at the way things were versus how do we fit into the discussion that a lot of people are having about how these new technologies are going to affect cities, communities in particular. And this is particularly important, I think, now because everybody's saying PEPCO, perhaps soon to be Exelon, should just underground stuff. That's not a bad idea generally, but are we just going to have wires? 20 years from now, is that all we're going to have? The way things are now, or is any of this going to look different?
Well, I just was at the microgrid conference yesterday, also going
I'm
back
a huge proponent.
to the National Town Meeting on Demand Response. I think it's hard to look at the SEU standalone. We mentioned the comprehensive energy plan, the mayor's sustainability plan, what we're doing at the commission and the company's doing in terms of upgrading the grid, making it ready for more two-way systems, and the undergrounding is really for reliability, but will present the opportunity to do upgrades, not just take the same old wire and put it underground, but make that capacity for two-way and for generation, which is why, again, in the last rate case order, we expressed that strong interest in load research and more granular kind of load research and appliance saturation. I don't know if it's going to take that. I've talked to Ted about this, but there's the way the measurements are set up, there's an inherent kind of conflict between, or not a conflict, but an incompatibility between pushing for renewable energy, which is simply shifting the source of the generation of the electricity, which are electricity in particular, versus reducing. And it's my understanding, for example, one of the difficulties is when you look at the 2009 baseline, if you go to solar, which we have a law requiring increase solar in the district up to 2.5% in about 8 years from now, you may not be reducing the consumption of electricity,
right,
but you're doing something very good in terms of sustainability and fulfilling city law, etc. And so, I think one of the things that has to be looked at too is what's the 2009 baseline? Is it electricity generated from non-clean sources, or is it, because if somebody is using 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, and they put solar on, and they're still using 1,000 kilowatts a month, but they're generating 30% of it. You've met a goal for city law and for the sustainability, but you haven't, I don't think the way it gets counted, the SEU, you haven't reduced electricity use. You've got Blue Plains, which is putting in a wonderfully, very technologically advanced aerobic digester, where they're going to take the solids from the sewage and use the gas and make steam and generate their own electricity. 30% of their electricity use is going to go from that. They're not going to use less electricity, but they're doing it from a different source. They're also looking at solar. This will be another 11 megawatts. The city's got a bid out for 10 megawatts of solar on various buildings. Well, electricity use is still going to stay the same, so per capita consumption is not going to go down. It might if you do other efficiency things, but it's sorting those two things out of, shifting to renewable energy and reducing overall per capita consumption aren't the same thing.
Right,
Should we look at it separately or something?
Yeah, they should be looked at separately. Yeah.
Part of this death spiral argument is
Yes.
if Blue Plains, which has to be one of the largest customers,
It is the largest customer.
Yeah.
It's the largest customer.
is basically going to start producing 30% of its own energy.
Probably 40% by the time they get the solar in.
Then the utility companies all of a sudden are losing their largest, or at least 40% of their largest customer. I'm not suggesting,
Right.
What I'm not saying is, Keith, let's have this big discussion here, but this is in your portfolio. And I just want to make sure that what we're doing here is not just on the margins, without including it in your portfolio review of PACE and, grid scale storage, in my opinion, is going to be online within 3 to 5 years.
We've got some combined heat and power projects proposed. We've got the community renewable energy facility.
Yeah, so...
The issue that you raised, that's a rate design issue. That will, I'm sure, be before the commission in terms of, the sort of standby rates and those other kinds of things, and we would invite anyone who wants to participate. I won't say any more after.
Proponent of solar, huge proponent of what we're talking about, but I just want to see it presented.
And John, I just wanted to comment, because of course you mentioned Petco. We have but we've been definitely at the table around concepts such as microgrids. It's something that we have been exploring, engaging around various jurisdictions, including the District of Columbia. It's something that we're not opposed to. One of the things that Chairman Kane referenced is when you start going in that direction as it relates to rate design, going back to what you referenced as it relates to the undergrounding project, that is, and I'm being repetitive, that is a very critical project that ultimately will facilitate some aspects of what we're talking about. And when we talk about undergrounding, the focus and the emphasis there was not about the elements of aesthetics. It was about reliability improvements when it came to storms and significant weather events. The impetus really was after the derecho that we experienced in the district. We have been at the table with numerous projects when we talk about Walter Reed and CHPP and certain things that are being looked at in that particular regard. But there are certain things on the regulatory side as well that have to be balanced. But it's something that we are definitely supportive of. But it's finding the appropriate pathway for that as well.
And could I?
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, I think the issue you raised is the tension between clean and, energy efficiency or energy reduction. And when you look at it from the clean perspective, then, that's one of the problems that Washington Gas has raised all along, is that use of gas may be cleaner, and therefore the energy reduction measure shouldn't really necessarily be there. It should be a balancing of that. And solar is the same thing. If you reduce, and you're reducing by using a cleaner source of power, then is that something we want to be negative about? Or you're allowing the use of electricity to be the same, but 30% of it's being generated by a cleaner fuel. Is that something that, from the district's planning and policy perspective, we want to, you know, be
For some
negative or send
sustainable
a
energy utilities, their principal performance measure is reduction of greenhouse gas.
Yes, exactly.
As opposed to all these other little things that
Right.
we're measuring.
Right.
And that's one approach you could take to it. But I think it's something we haven't fully explored.
I think that the comment was we may be getting to a point where we need to look at that again, because otherwise...
Two more comments on this matter, then we'll go back to Terry, Joe, and Dan.
Go ahead, Dan.
You know, Dan's ready.
Thank you. Don, I wanted to mention this to you and of course others. This may be not quite germane, but you have an ad on my radio station, a good ad that shows that the number of the losses from like when the wires go down and all this kind of business, that you all have reduced that by 37% in maybe a year or two, which is tremendous. But it does make me wonder, if that being the case, does it make sense to put all this stuff underground when there are alternative, maybe cheaper ways of doing this? In other words, instead of spending, I think it's $2 billion total, and the city contributing $1 billion, that you may cut that down.
It's actually a $1 billion project, and $500 million is through the traditional debt and equity structure with the utility. $375 million is through general revenue bonds, and also there's capital infrastructure dollars through the Department of Transportation, which has been certified around $60 million, and all of that is backed by a surcharge on electric customers' bills. But this is one of the things that we have to really focus on, where we are making great strides as it relates to improving reliability, as it relates to the metrics around frequency as well as duration of outages. There are certain things that we cannot, regardless of the upgrades that we make. And the example would be a derecho in which we're upgrading largely our feeders, rebuilding feeders. That's that overhead infrastructure. When you have massive storm events, when you have trees that's coming down on the wires, the impact that has on the quality of life of residents, the economic impacts, etc., those are things that would not be prevented by the types of upgrades that we're making on an overhead distribution type system. That would prevent it if we underground it in those particular circumstances.
So you're saying the 37% reduction has nothing to do with you all going out and pruning trees and all that?
Vegetation management is a critical part, as well as infrastructure and upgrades, but the type of events that was the precipitous for what we're doing from a reliability perspective are massive storm events. An example, once again, being the derecho, regardless of the improvements that you make on the overhead structure, that is not going to prevent the severity of the impacts on customers during those events.
Joe.
Yeah, maybe just a comment about this discussion. I'm a big proponent for cleaner generation. I think that what I want to make sure is not lost is the fact that energy efficiency really, as people have said, is the first fuel. I'm a free market guy because I believe until the building owners themselves start putting more and more money into these deals, without government assistance or with minimal government assistance, we're not going to achieve the real results that we need. We have a very large built environment in D.C. Some of these energy efficiency investments have internal rates of return without incentives, 25%. That's excellent money if you can get it. It increases portfolio value, so I don't want to lose sight of that. We're building a very large something somewhere. We need to, in my opinion, sort of focus on both because we need to impact economic development on both sides. So that's the only comment.
Thank you.
All right, so then improving the energy efficiency in low-income housing. The recommendation was to assess the benchmark in conjunction with the energy savings benchmark, given the acquisition cost differences. So the acquisition costs on the low-income side are higher than acquiring the non-low-income energy efficiency resources. So thinking about how that 30% requirement then impacts the overall achievable target is important. So
I'd like to add a comment on this. I've made this comment a number of times. The low-income, most of it's multifamily, if I'm not mistaken. The folks that live in these low-income apartments are low-income. The people that own them are not low-income. They're actually quite well off. So and I think that the SEU is doing this now because we're actually out there looking right now ourselves for some of this. It's been 100% pay. Look for more market participation so you get market leverage. That would definitely reduce your acquisition costs. So, do a 50% or 70% copay type situation for larger retrofits like LED lighting compartments, things and so on. So I want to make sure we distinguish between both the owners and the residents of the two. I would highly promote the changing the direct spend model to more efficacy model in terms of benchmarks for low income, because I think that will change the acquisition cost and efficacy significantly.
And then reducing the growth in the energy demand of largest users. You can't quite see the bottom there, but really just comparing with the page report, there's 2 tracking indicators that would be useful. One is just really for the DCSU to report on what the nature and scope of the engagement with large energy users is, and then up the yield. And then the other is reporting on that specific yield that they're getting, or if you want to flip the equation, what the acquisition cost is for the energy efficiency resources associated with the larger energy users. So just really reporting on a couple other metrics that help us gauge what kind of progress is being made in that regard. And then finally, increasing the number of green-collar jobs. So I think folks are aware that the DCSU has actually made some good strides towards moving along that market transformation path. I know that they've got a couple of new approaches within their portfolio. One, instead of the direct install on the C&I side, for example, requiring that at least about a 30% contribution from the participants in the lighting program, so that certainly is helping. And I also understand that the district businesses now are approaching the DCSEU much more frequently as opposed to the other way around. So that indicates a couple things. One, market transformation. Customers do want to participate in these programs. 2, awareness of the DCSU has certainly risen from when we came out and reported our results a year ago. But then also, one of the other things I think is on probably a future slide here is that with that market transformation and as part of our assessment in this past go-around, we took a look and talked with customers that had the 100% contribution, as well as the customers then that had been 100% contribution to the DCSU versus the customers then that had to contribute. And there really was not a marginal or significant or really any difference to talk about between the satisfaction with those participants through the program. So I think, to your point, customers, I think, do expect to actually have something to contribute. And when you look at research in other areas, really people that contribute seem to have valued that service more because they've actually had a stake in, a financial stake in that decision. And so there's a lot of good reasons to go toward the market transformation model. 1, you're lowering your acquisition costs. 2, I think you do increase your satisfaction as customers appreciate the value that they're getting. And but I think one of the things to point out that under the green job model, with the direct installation model, with the DCSU hiring contractors to work with customers to directly install equipment, or the no cost model, they lose some of that control when moving into the market transformation model. And I know you guys are aware. Now customers under that model are going to choose who it is that they want to work with. It's not going to be within the DCSU's control, and nor should it be, to your point. Really should be kind of driven by the market. Who do they want to serve them? And then how and what do they need to contribute to be able to participate?
Can I just ask a question of clarification on that? So you're saying it couldn't be under the control of the SEU. In other words, if the SEU were co-paying in some capacity, it's a market incentive, but that still, I think, qualifies as transformation. It's a co-pay. Couldn't they require that the contract recipient, the contractor, be a certified business entity, or couldn't they essentially prescribe what the universe of contractors would be, in which case they could, in fact, have some measure of control? Or is that, am I not understanding something properly?
So, it depends on what incentive. For example, the T12 to TA program is a specific prescriptive program where the SEU is putting in 70%.
Right.
The marketplace has a selection of a pool of contractors that they can use, although I'm sure that non-contractors can also bring those deals to the SEU. If you're talking about business center rebates, $50 for this light or 10% for this, then the property manager, building owner could use their handyman or their particular contractor that they use.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it can be influenced even at a market rate by having certain requirements. I'm not apologetic about the fact that we do pay a living wage at a minimum for folks, and we pay for their health insurance. That probably will make us more expensive than someone that's paying minimum wage and no benefits coming out of Maryland or Virginia or even DC. So I think having some requirements that incentivize local participation, keeping a local base, is possible even with a co-tax.
Yeah.
And I think that the SU has actually been pretty effective.
Well, and that's why I was trying to get a clarification on your assertion that we wouldn't be able to.
This jobs thing really is interesting to me because I got this presentation last night and I did look at the thing over the weekend. Thank you, media, for sending it out soon so we can review it. I don't need to get into the details right now about this, but I see a number for FY13 verified 32. I'm a numbers guy, so if I go to the SU all the time, either making a check or see what's going on, blah, 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 and I see about 32 people in that office, and then I know that we, perhaps not as consistent as I'd like to be in the marketplace, we employ a certain number of people, and I'm just one of a dozen or more contractors that they work with, including consultants and so forth. So I'm just curious how that number was calculated. I don't need, if somebody could just send me the calculation to actually get to the number, then I would understand it more. This is just a question I have because it seems, I don't know, I actually don't know whether it's right or not. It just doesn't make sense to me. But if someone could explain it to me separately, I would appreciate it.
Certainly, and it's a very simple calculation. That number is actually based on, one, folks that we can verify are DC residents, and two, on a certified payroll where you document the number of hours worked each day for your employees and the rate of pay. The hours are important towards counting to the job. The rate of pay is the Living Wage Act. We need to make sure that folks are being paid. That's a very straightforward process. As you know, for FY13, there were some issues between switching between one compliance officer and the next, and there were some jobs that may have been lost in the process. And some contractors, quite honestly, have not been as maybe as timely as you have been in reporting this information to the DCSU. So it's always a struggle trying to get the payrolls on time or even completed in a manner that will clearly reflect the work being done by the DCSU.
So, this probably even begs the question more about some of your recommendations on this, with some spot audits, making it less, the compliance is important, but doing it based on sort of some industry standards, or with some spot audits done to make sure that people aren't gaming the system, something to that effect, make it more market-based. I would just suggest that. Because the number 32 just doesn't seem to make sense to me, given the amount of money that was spent in the actual payroll that the DCSU has. Do you guys look over the DCSU personnel submit certified payroll to you guys?
Yes, DCSU personnel are required to submit payroll.
All right, that's all. Thank you.
And then, Mr. March, your questions and concerns. I think what I'm trying to say here is that, and certainly the DCSU can put requirements around participating in the programs for the incentives. The more requirements you have, though, the barriers could be presented. So I think it's a balance. What makes sense for achieving all the other benchmarks in conjunction of, in coordination or, correlation with the green jobs requirements. So, it's, I guess, really comes down to, what is the appropriate balance of requirements in conjunction with moving more toward market transformation, letting customers choose who it is that they would want to do the work within their facilities, and then the achievement of ultimately what those energy savings targets need to be.
Question? One question, we'll move on.
Terry, at the beginning, I couldn't read the numbers, but specifically on the number of green collar jobs, I would like to know the number of green jobs that were created in fiscal 12 and in fiscal 13, and for 13. Well, and also how many of those green jobs created were DC, and thirdly, the missing of the objective in 13, how much was it missed by? Does that make sense?
Certainly. And some of that detail we have here, so
Yeah, I can't read it.
yeah, the minimum target in 13 was 62, and the reported achievement, verified achievement was 32. So a little better than half of the minimum target was achieved in 13.
And why, maybe it was answered, why such a big difference?
That's a DCSU question, so to speak, and a big difference. But I think if I can offer an explanation, part of it is the move to the market transformation programs that we talked about. When you're offering a larger portion of incentives to customers, then it becomes real difficult to control that situation and be able to capture those jobs. And if you look at the difference between the amount of incentives the DCSU spent in 12 versus in 13, then that alone can help explain why they dropped in the numbers from 41 last year down to 32 this year. And I think the more you go to the market-based, the more you incentivize the process where you don't control who folks hire, the more difficult it will be to achieve this green jobs number.
Does this number of 32, does that, well, I mean, I know the SEU hires nothing but DC people. What about the contractors? What percent of DC people do they hire?
I don't have that detail. I don't know. Do you know, Ted or Marcus offhand? What those?
No, but Carrie, these numbers you have up here are only DC residents, correct?
Exactly.
That's correct.
Yeah.
These
Yeah, those are all DC residents.
I don't know what else.
So that includes SEU plus?
Contractors.
Plus contract.
Yes.
To comply with the life reporting
And
requirements.
their report.
Okay.
Explain.
But then, my understanding, well, I don't know how many SEU employees there are. I thought there were around 30, so if that's so, only 2 from the, can you clarify that? I see what I'm getting at?
I do. I don't know, Lance, or, I mean, I'm sorry, Marcus, or
Do you want me to respond?
do you,
I know I'll sound like a broken record on this to a certain extent, but in the 2+ years that I've been working with this organization, I've pledged to this board and to the city that I would only hire DC residents, and we haven't wavered from that. And so when we started FY13, we had approximately 30 DC residents on staff. As we ended FY13, we had, 35, 36 DC residents on staff. Clearly, we have a number of teaming partners who work with us. George Nichols and Associates. George is a DC resident. Cliff Major's a consider in his team. Cliff has DC residents on his team. In addition to that, you have probably more than 20 CVEs who work with us in a variety of capacities. Mr. Andronico mentioned he's got about 6-7 people on his staff. I talked with Ralph McMillan today. He's got about an equivalent number of people on his staff. And we don't represent the totality of Mr. Andronico's business or of Mr. McMillan's business, but these are typical. We represent about 60% of their business. All told, last year, we calculated probably about 400 DC residents, not working full-time, but working part-time for various contractors, various entities in fulfillment of some of the work that was done through the DCSEU. This 32 isn't our number. I think we would report a different number if we were asked to report on this.
Your reported number was 45.
Yeah, right. And we believe that we are taking strides to, we know this notion of administrative cost is on everybody's mind. And what are your administrative costs? Well, if you talk about the top driver of administrative cost, it is actually counting the number of jobs that are created. And I don't know that comports with the spirit, intent, or reading the letter of this law. I wasn't around when this was set up. I wasn't on the advisory board, so I wasn't part of those discussions. But I don't think I would feel comfortable, we would feel comfortable as an organization if we drive up our administrative costs excessively to report on this number. We do everything we can to, again, hire DC residents, hire CBEs where we can, put CBEs and DC residents to work. But as you see, there is a variance of about, 33% or so in what we reported and what's verified here through Tetra Tech.
I mean, I can say as a contractor that the DCSU goes way above and beyond what any other district agency that I've interacted with in terms of promoting DC residents. In fact, our requirement is to have 88% or greater, some 75% or greater DC residents on the work that we do, which is far in excess of DGS or other agencies that put lots of money out to do. I don't think that I think the DCSU, and I don't think I think it could be done in a way where it doesn't have to drive up huge acquisition costs. The district is a more expensive place to do business than a lot of other jurisdictions. You have to drive it up dramatically. I think we need a common sense approach to measuring things, and then having requirements and then compliance checks to make sure that it's being done. I want to put as much money into the marketplace because a larger pool, you're talking about a limited amount of money that goes into these programs a year. We need to have market leverage, and hopefully with some legislation changes, financial leverage, and take that 20 million to 50, 60, 70 million a year to really address or greater the built environment. It's a very serious built environment, and I think that we're dealing at the edges of this. I think we can move to a more commonsensical approach to measurement of these so that we can then let the contractor, the marketplace, and everybody else do their thing at optimum level. That's just my suggestion.
And if I can just follow up to what Mr. Andronico is saying, I think, Ms. Lutz, you recognized earlier in here, and I think it's important for the board to recognize as well, there are a number of jobs that are created, work that is done, where we are not able to track the hours and who did that. Business Energy Services was mentioned. We probably moved well over $1 million worth of products through that line of operations last year. Now, those furnaces and those lights just don't jump into sockets, or the plumbing doesn't happen by itself. Somebody is installing those, but we are not in privity of contract with the contractors who are doing the work, and we're not able to gather that hourly information. Consistent with that, you would look at the work that we do in our custom jobs, where we're only putting an incremental part of the cost of the job on the table, where we don't, in fact, we don't call on the contractor. We don't specify who will do the work. The building owner, in fact, makes that call, and we don't have that reported information there. So we'll put $100,000 on the table to make $1 million project go. There's a lot of work that gets generated by that, but again, those hours are not reflected here. So I don't want the board to think that that's all that's being created in the district. There's a lot more work and hours that are being created. We're just not able, unfortunately, under the current methodology, we're not able to capture those hours.
Should we change the methodology then? I think it's so highly commendable that Chad is able to hire 100% people after hearing the first decision. All the people that have been trained, just that 32 numbers seems so darn low, so it's not counting this other thing that would be very useful to be able to do that.
I think that this issue should rise to fairly near the top of our priority list. It comes up at almost every meeting. Every time, certainly, we review the performance benchmarks, we identify it as problematic. I'm not entirely sure how we arrive at our number of 70. I mean, if it's based on counting that is only done. You identified a number of areas where we're not accurately capturing job hours that are being put into installation and whatnot. Well, if the 70 doesn't count those hours, then I think then maybe we have a good target. But if it in fact somehow incorporates implicitly that there are these hours that are going into work and they're not being captured, well then we have something broken.
We're comparing apples and oranges right now.
Well, I don't know that we are.
We are.
Are we?
I have 2 points to that. One, the figure that you see there, the 77, is actually based on expenditures. The way it's calculated, every $200,000 spent by the DCSU is expected to create 1 job.
And there's all kinds of implicit expectations with that.
Exactly.
We need to know what those
make
are.
the assumption that the DCSU will be able to control all of the various things that we've been discussing in the last 10 minutes. But the second point I do want to mention is that the DOE and the DCSU have been having several conversations and discussions about green jobs benchmarks, and we have a few things on the table that haven't been ironed out in contract amendments, but they're in the works, and we do plan on making some adjustments to this particular benchmark to capture some of those things, especially around them offering incentives and their managing control of that situation, or even reducing the base amount of hours required to create 1 FTE. Right now it's at 2,008. Most companies, work 1950 hours, to calculate 1 FTE. So all of those minor adjustments will help to make this benchmark more reflective of the DCSU efforts.
Ultimately, would this not require legislative change?
This does not require any legislative change because the legislation is pretty vanilla in the sense that it just requires them to increase the number of green-collar jobs. If you recall, the board, through the extensive efforts, came up with benchmarks for the DCSU contract.
So we could...
So those are, it does allow for any changes to be negotiated between DCSU and DDOE as we go forward.
By calculation, all the money that's spent on the light bulbs and the business entry rebates and all those incentives is not being counted for jobs because you're just taking the 100% expenditure number, dividing it by 200,000, or an expenditure number dividing it by 200,000, coming up with 100. One way to do it, it's just even without changing things, would be to take out all the rebate stuff, all the rebate stuff that goes to the market versus the direct spend with the one that they influence. Divide that by 200,000 and see how many jobs are created there. That's something with it. That's something that we could even do for FY23 to see how.
It's good to know that DDOE is negotiating this with the SEU, but I just wondered if there'd be any value, since the advisory board constantly brings it up, whether it might not be something we would want to discuss at some point. We're an advisory board. I don't know. If I set my attention to this, I could probably come up with some good ideas too. But we haven't had it on the agenda.
I think this is something that maybe a subcommittee should attack and present to the full board in conjunction with what DOE and the SEU have been discussing. Does that make sense?
I mean, I realize if it's already a contract negotiation, it can't be public. I get that.
Exactly.
Right.
And we are a public body.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just thinking somehow an opportunity's been missed.
But we're always welcome to recommendations and suggestions. It's the same thing, the Page report that generated a number of recommendations. The board can also put forward certain recommendations for us to consider. And then, that gets incorporated into the discussions. But as far as, getting to that final number, it's a conversation between DDOE and DCSU.
I had a question. Going back to the EM&V, so I know that it's obviously based on the existing methodology as it relates to the number of jobs that are created. Is there an opportunity to qualify this somewhat? Because this is not necessarily...
77?
Exactly.
Well, let me do the quick math for you. The SEU contract is $20 million for this year. Less expenses incurred for EM&V. So if you take out the 8% set aside that the fiscal agent withholds, you're down to about $18.4 million. Then you have to think about the performance incentives that are tied into the contract, which is $800,000 for this year. Less that, you're down to $17.6 million. $17.6 million times $200,000 gives you that figure of 77.
All right, so 17,600,000, 200, 1, 2, 3 equal divided. That gives you 88. If I did that right.
But that's for this year.
That's
Last year the math was slightly different because we were operating
what I'd
at
like
17.5.
just just for apples and apples comparison, if we could take out any of the expenditures on the light bulbs, the incentive, the custom, where you weren't managing, so just keep it to the direct spend of the SU itself, its consultant contracts, T12 to TA, and ICDI. If you just take that and divide by 200,000, how many jobs should that give us? Because then that's what you compare against the certified payrolls.
Yeah.
Not this number. This number, they're never going to hit it. At this calculation,
Exactly.
even if the 200,000
Well, I
is
mean,
wrong, they're never going to hit it.
the rebates, the light bulbs,
Yeah, all that.
they're made someplace else. And, you put them in Home Depot, you put them in Frager's, you put them someplace. You can't expect it to create a job.
So I actually think that measurement, that number 6, not achieved, I don't think that's accurate. I don't know if it's achieved or not. Because the way it's being calculated is not consistent with the way that it should be. You cannot control the expenditures on.
Lance, can we work potential check to recalculate that number based on suggested by Joe?
Well, that wouldn't be possible at this juncture simply because you're going back to change a previous contract.
That is apples
But
and
going
oranges.
forward,
I get it.
Just so that
to see what it would have been.
Just for comparison purposes, can we see what that looks like?
Certainly, and we would need to get some more information from the DCSU in terms of the amount spent on the incentives and so forth, so that we can get.
I think everyone around the table would be interested to see what that number looks like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would
Yeah.
be.
And I was just going to say, Keith, in terms of, I'm not sure we need a subcommittee. We're giving that advice now.
Okay, well, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, this should all be.
General advice,
We're
advising that
we're meeting.
needs to have another look at it.
I actually think in light of this, as well as maybe some of the legislation that's upcoming, I'll suggest this again, we perhaps ought to have a meeting where we advise on the measures themselves, all the measures, not just the job measures, from a strategic perspective, and we could just give DDOE and the SEU our advice on it, and then whatever you all decide to do from a contract
And do that
perspective.
before there's a contract finish.
Yeah, do it before the contract.
I think now would be the time to do that.
This is really excellent.
Which is what we're doing
This
right
is
now.
exactly what we need to see and ask questions about and comment on. So this is, by the way, I like the way that this is set up. It'd be great to see, because I think it is important to see not just the performance, because historically what we've seen is the minimum target as the target. That's just the minimum target. I like to see the performance target and the minimum target on a regular basis to see how we're doing against it, because it could be misleading if you don't follow it closely. So this is an excellent way to show things. So thank you.
We have about 30 minutes left for this meeting, so I want to get through your presentation and any other follow-up questions. We have 2 other presentations to get through. So.
All right, so, unless, I think we actually have the information needed to calculate that comparison.
Great.
Show that with your we can calculate it.
Okay.
Work together on that. And, then moving on, just finishing out that discussion on the green jobs, I think that really what you're talking about, Joe and others, is based on a lot of what the PAGE report actually recommended. So you look at restructuring, how that is being calculated. I think a good way to do it, Joe, could be exactly what you're saying, rather than trying to be more inclusive, restrict the dollars down to direct spend, and then talk about direct jobs. Or I think another way to do it, and it's probably more in line with how others do it across the country, is to include additional types of jobs that have been created. So what are those indirect jobs that have been created, as well as what are those induced jobs created? So there's a couple different ways it could be done, and really it's up to the board and the district, the DDO, to decide what is most appropriate, under this context.
Just a question. I don't think I was clear when I raised the question the last time. What I was asking is, in this particular document, when it is ultimately finalized, can there be something in this document that speaks to that in some fashion in this particular category that addresses that?
In the EM&V document?
Exactly. That's what I was requesting.
Yeah, we can extract the contract language and put it in here so you understand how it's calculated.
All right, so I know you guys can't read this, and that's the detail up here really just what this is the evaluation of the trackable portfolio results. So within each track, the evaluation team evaluates the reported savings and comes up with what we consider then the verified savings. And we look at it on a track-by-track basis. So for example, within the lighting, the retail lighting product, we take a look at the reports and the data that were provided and do an assessment compared to what the calculations should be according to the technical reference manual to come up with realization rates. So what the realization rate would be is what we have verified at the evaluation based on the data and documentation we have. compared to what was reported. So that's what this provides. It's just a summary of this at the track level and then overall at the portfolio level, but the comparison to the fiscal year 12 portfolio results. So I think the first thing I'd like to point out, when you look at fiscal year 12, the verified savings were under 20 million kilowatt hours compared to the fiscal year 13 portfolio results of getting up to near 50 million kWh. So again, and I know you guys are aware of this, I think that, the DCSU has really made tremendous strides in increasing the amount of kWh that they're delivering, or energy resources that they're delivering within the district. On the KW side, moving from 33.2 3,200 to almost 7,600 kW reduction. And then on the gas side, moving from a negative 11, because remember this takes into consideration the interactive effects, to 50 on the MMBTU gas savings side. These numbers, this is on MMBTU basis. This is what we have in our tracking system that we verify. The ultimate, what's reported in the performance benchmark chart, just in case those, I'm sure some people notice that there's a difference. It's MCF in the performance benchmark, whereas in the tracking system it's tracked as MMBTU and then converted. So really this is just what's in the tracking base compared to what we were able to verify. So at the portfolio level again, for the fiscal year 12, the realization rate on kWh was 92%, and this year it was 104%. So we actually found an additional 4% savings for a verification effort that had been reported. So that's what that means there. On the KW side, 95% compared to 107% verified. And then on the gas savings side, it was 0.99%, or 99% rather than 100% on the verification for fiscal year 13.
I have a question. It's sort of on the parameters of this whole chart. And it's one I think I raised the last time with you. There is a spending sort of parameter that's under the Act that says for the overall programs, the SEU must spend 75% of the funds that comes from the gas customers, or 75% of the funds that comes for the electric customers for gas or electric programs. When you did your evaluation, was that minimum met, and the ceiling, there's also a ceiling under the Act?
That is outside our scope of work, so that is one of the contractual obligations actually the DDOE evaluates.
We try to capture that in the energy audit report, so as soon as we have that report ready to go, you will see that.
All right. So your report does not deal with that parameter at all?
It does not. It's the overall report results and the 6 performance benchmarks. And then really, just real quick, again, I know you can't treat it, but looking across different realization rates at the track level, many of them right around that 100%, which means that the report results are pretty darn accurate. There's a few programs where there's some opportunity to improve. The one would be the low-income T12 lighting replacement program. That actually is being absorbed into the comprehensive program, so I'm not sure how that'll play out in the coming year. The next one would be the custom market opportunity, but for that, the 89%, there was not a large amount of participation, so really just one project could swing that realization rate. But really still at 89%, we're not talking, it's not a big red flag that there's something wrong in the portfolio or in the management of that particular app.
Sorry, I know that you mentioned this earlier, I don't know if it was actually on the slide, but you went back and looked at the gas results without the impact of lighting. Is that somewhere on here?
That isn't. We didn't. What I did was did a quick assessment to come up with an approximation of what that MMBTU interactive effect amount was. It wasn't a detailed analysis, so that's why I didn't put it on the slide. But it was about 30,000 MMBTUs.
30,000 MMBTU.
About.
For this past year?
For fiscal year 13. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on the...
Yeah, on the solar hot water, do I read that right, that it was all replacing gas fixtures, no replacement of electric hot water?
That's correct. It's on the gas side. Yep. And then there's also, as you notice, I mean, a lot of these, you can see some of the interactive effects on these negatives. But then you'll see also that there's starting to be a lot more positives with the low-income comprehensive, some
more real gas measures being installed to help on that end. If you look up here on the custom services, a lot of focus on gas in the custom program, custom track. So really helping drive more savings on that end as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a hard stop at 12 o'clock, so can we get through this presentation?
Yeah.
And then if you have any questions, we'll ask that.
All right, so some key findings on the strength side, as we've talked about, there really does seem to be that movement and momentum toward that market-based transformation, or market-based portfolio really is gaining momentum. And I mentioned the participants and contractors are both very happy with the custom programs and the commercial lighting tracks, which in particular are where they're trying to get more of that market-based opportunity from. The programs are cost-effective, and the DCSU cost-effectiveness results are accurately reported, and then acquisition costs are declining on that last bullet there. Some others are the DCSU technical opportunities for improvement. So one of the things that we have recommended, in fact we did submit a separate memo to that effect, is the technical reference manual is a very good document. And I know that we reported that in that last year as well. But there are still some opportunities for improvement. One of the improvements that we recommend, because it does have a good bit of impact on the verified or reported results even, is moving more towards CNI load shapes that are more reflective of what's actually which actually reflects where work is being done within the district. So what we mean by that is, right now the TRM, the Technical Reference Manual, allows for the use of a commercial blended load shape. And when we actually take a look at what the actual sites are that are participating in those programs, the blended load shape for the past year really has not been reflective of what is actually occurring within the district. So we actually did a quantification of that assessment in this past year for just one track, for the CNI prescriptive track, to get an idea of just how big of an issue is this. And by looking at that track, the lighting projects, if you take into consideration what the actual makeup or the facility, their operating hours would be, and these load shapes are available in the TRM, so it's not just that the commercial is available. These other load shapes are there, and so using those other load shapes that are more site reflective, the realization rates would be quite different for that track. So instead of a near 100% realization rate, you get down to about a 62% realization rate. So I think there's a lot of good reason, again, with the ultimate objective of being able to report and reflect on what is actually happening within the district. I think it is important for us to adopt load shapes that are really more reflective. And there's a couple ways. Either we could do it based on actual projects, or each year there could be a true-up. The data is being collected, so that's the other point I do want to make. So on the application forms, that information is available to help with that assessment and help update those load shapes. Or apply either the site reflective load shape or kind of update what that blended rate looks like each year, so that each year you're getting a true representation. One of the other recommendations was, and I want to start off with saying that this actually, we saw improvement on this as the year progressed. So beginning of fiscal year 13 to the end of fiscal year 13, project files were getting a lot better organized. But it was one of our challenges this past evaluation cycle, was just trying to find the final files for us to be able to verify. And the DCSU, VEIC folks are very open, they're very transparent, they provide anything that we're asked for. The challenge was that it was so much, and trying to identify final files really was quite challenging at times, and really did create a lot more hours on our end to try to do the evaluation, and therefore, a lot more evaluation expense. And then finally, one of the things we've noticed in particular this past go-around was that, especially on the CNI side, is that participants are getting a bit weary of being contacted to participate in evaluations and follow-ups and surveys. So one of our recommendations, in fact, I can move on to the next slide. One of our recommendations would be to I'm sorry?
It wasn't on the previous.
Was it on the previous slide? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, it's one of these. One of our recommendations is to try and coordinate more directly with the DCSU when they do their on-site QA/QC. Because I think you folks are aware that they do 100% QA/QC. So if we are able to align our evaluation efforts up with those, it's only one visit out to the customer and really gives us greater access and better able then to verify actual installation and even conduct measurement if the project warrants that. All right, so we talked about some of these recommendations already, but completing a baseline study to identify and validate or update potential study results was one. Revising the TRM and tracking system to accommodate those additional load shapes or to kind of calibrate what that commercial blended load shape looks like each year. And then establishing a final documentation folder so that we can, of course, find our final files that we need a lot more easily to make that evaluation effort more efficient. And then some of our evaluation strategies for fiscal year 14. I mentioned we were conducting a cost study, trying to get a better handle on just what the costs, how the costs are between incentive costs and non-incentive costs, and then how non-incentive costs might break out and play within the district over the last 2.5 years. So looking at 12, 13, and then the first half of 14. And then also, along with trying to coordinate our on-site efforts, we would like to establish what's called a dynamic sampling protocol. So we would start doing evaluation, at least on the C&I side initially, during the actual implementation year, so that when we get to the end of the year, we don't have as much work ahead of us. That's one benefit. Two, the benefit is what I said before, we can try and coordinate those efforts with the DCSU staff so we're not doing repeat visits to the customers. And then three, we can provide a lot better, more timely response and information and feedback to the DCSU and where there might be opportunities for improvement.
And I'll add to the advisory board, that'll also give us results sooner so that when we file our reports, and a report to the council, we might be more sure about the results of that recommendation.
You would have partial results.
Partial results.
Right,
Yeah,
you wouldn't have the full year.
I understand.
The challenge, there's going to be challenge. I mean, I think we can do that. And while I'm on sites, in the district this week, we're going to meet with the DCSU folks and talk about how that can work. Because one of the challenges within the district is, kind of that ramp down each year and then the ramp back up due to the annual contract and figuring out then how do you trend what is expected to happen in each quarter so that we can do a dynamic sampling and have, in the end, a sample, evaluation sample that's reflective of the population. And finally, we're also looking at what might there be summer baseline opportunity-wise. So last year we came out and we did a couple of baseline metering efforts on some of the larger cooling equipment type projects. So that is really opportunity for getting the information in the summer. So again, we're going to be looking at what opportunities are for that this summer and pursuing those that make sense. And then finally, we want to take more of a look at the Food Bank Initiative Giveaway Program. So getting a better understanding of what is actually installed compared to what is given away. So a couple ways that we can do that is one, work with the distributing food banks to be on site and observe events and recruit participants in an on-site survey for those willing. And as an alternative, we could provide a postcard for folks to fill out, hand in later, or send in later. We actually did that tactic for the sector attribution study and leakage study that we talked about last time I was here, and it was somewhat effective. But it provides an alternative for folks if they will, for us to gather data. And then following up, you can't see the bullet, with a phone survey to provide that contact information or willing to participate in further research. So again, the idea of that would be to really get a better handle on the actual installation rates of that program through the district instead of just assuming 100%. Oh, questions?
Is it possible to get, for the board members to have a email copy of your presentation? Sure.
We got it
It
last
was-
time.
Yeah, it was sent out.
Oh,
So that's fine.
It would have gone to Sandra.
yeah.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
I think we all know this is the room where the mayor holds its press conference. So when I see you up there, especially when you're behind the podium, I get confused. I think you're the mayor, so.
I don't think I look anything like the mayor.
All right.
If I can present that confidence, then that's okay.
In the interest of time, I'm going to make a change to the agenda. The presentation on Board of Ethics and Government Accountability Guidance for Drafting Meeting Minutes, we're going to move that to the next meeting. So at this time, Larry, when you have the floor, give us an update on
And I can certainly
planning and
cut back that from 20 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
So I wanted to talk about three dimensions of this proposed public meeting around the SEU. So the three dimensions were what exactly we want to accomplish, what's our objective for this meeting, and then sort of subsidiary topics, content and panelists, as well as our audience. So maybe we can just keep it to the first overarching topic now, and then I think it's clear that I think to be successful, we're going to have a subgroup to talk more about this. The one characterization of this meeting that stuck in my mind was that as an SEU advisory board, we really need to focus on the SEU. But yet the impetus for doing a public meeting was the mayor's proposed legislation to have public meetings that are more overarching and looking at the energy issues in the district. But I think we could probably accomplish this by talking about, sort of the overarching needs, as we were discussing earlier. We naturally moved into that conversation when we were discussing performance measures earlier, and we were talking about, what can the SEU accomplish versus the other initiatives going on in D.C. So we've had one meeting where we met primarily with Sierra Club Energy Committee. We had representative from the Office of People's Council there, and there were other organizations present to kind of coordinate through the Sierra Club Energy Committee. At that time, there was a thought that, this would be kind of a public organizational impetus to put together this meeting. When I reported at our last meeting, I was kind of, I had my chain yanked, and I was like, no, this is an advisory board initiative. We keep it that way. So we've had a little bit of a course change direction there. But at that one meeting, what we did discuss, which I think was a fruitful proposal, was the idea of what is the SEU's role in meeting the district's 2032 50-50 energy goals. 50% improved efficiency, 50% renewable energy. Because in putting it in that context, we're then able to talk about, the larger constellation of energy projects in the district and how they kind of all add up. What is the SEU's unique contribution? And it lends the conversation lends itself naturally then to talk about where's their leveraging, where's their complementarity, things of that nature. So I wanted to put that out as sort of an overarching framework for talking about a public meeting first, just to get some comments and discussion and see if that seems fruitful or if there are other ideas. And then I thought perhaps we might just decamp into a smaller group to discuss this. And I think it's important that we discuss this with DDOE, because clearly a lot of the programs are managed and or at least organized under the Energy Division. So it wouldn't only be an advisory board meeting. I think it would also very much have to be a DDOE meeting in order to have the full scope of program and information presented. So, discussion.
I'd actually like to, I appreciate your comment. I was thinking about it. I'd like to get a sense from Keith. It's tempting on the one hand just to talk about SEU and the programs in place. I think as Larry was suggesting, I find it hard to do in the context of the larger, energy plan for the city. And, what is your reaction
To Larry's comment.
well, should we just have a public meeting about this, or might it be better to talk more broadly about the city's doing? Because you've got all those programs.
I think it may be beneficial to talk about the programs overall. That way you avoid just staying in a silo of the SEU, and we can look at the bigger picture. So I'd be amenable to talking about our programs just overall, however you want to do that.
I think there would be a lot of interest, not just in the community, but in the broader community here, which includes, you've got a number of the ESCOs have a presence here, the energy services companies. I know they'd be interested in hearing more about the thinking behind, what DC's thinking. And I just think there would be potentially a good kind of broad audience.
I agree.
Yeah, I should pick up on Larry's sort of theme of where does the SEU fit within, or what's its role within the larger energy program, sustainability program
That goes
for
back
the city.
to the branding issue as well.
Yeah, and what's appropriate for these ratepayer-funded programs. Where do they fit versus other kinds of things that are going on, taxes and incentives and pace and all that. What is the schedule? I mean, I think that the way to do it, the sustainable energy program is out. I mean, that's known, the mayor's 50/50 program. But there's the comprehensive energy program too that hasn't been
Plan.
the plan.
Yeah.
The plan. That I'm thinking timing. When is that going to be out? And you're going to do some public hearings, or you've done some hearings of that.
Yeah, we're very close. We got the comments from the consultants. As you know, we shared the plan with some of the district agencies that provided input that was incorporated into the plan. We just got those back last week. So DDOE right now, the next phase is to get through a public comment period, so to speak, where we put the plan up on the website and we send it out to various stakeholders in the industry to really comment on the plan and then finalize the document out here. But in terms of incorporating all of the various energy efforts under one umbrella, I think it's a worthwhile discussion to have, simply because we have SDC, we have the CAEA, all of these are energy goals, and as it relates to the mayor's plan, I think the SEU directly contributes towards that, from their activities along, energy consumption reduction, even increasing renewable energy use. But we still have to look at it within the context of we have a contract that's contributing to an overall goal. DEO is more than welcome to have that conversation with you. We have several of the folks who manage the sustainable DC effort in our office, and we can bring them down to the table too and really explain all of the efforts that we're undertaking towards getting to that big goal.
As well as other agencies.
Yes, certainly.
Well, general services.
Well, and the utilities.
Yeah, so I mean.
There's lots going on.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess my question is just simply, what was the initial purpose of this meeting? Wasn't it for advising the public and seeking their input on the activities and achievements of the SEU? Now it seems like it's so much broader. So I just want to make sure we know what it is we're doing. You can start with one thing, and then before you know it, it's gigantic. Mm-hmm. So it looks like you're talking about now a citywide energy sustainability conference versus a public meeting focused on the efforts of the SEU. So I just want to make sure we're clear on what it is, what the initial purpose
Karen,
was.
I think that the big question of just that we might take up in a citywide, comprehensive energy planning process thing is really, really big. It's hard for almost anyone to wrap their mind around something like that. But I think starting at it from a fairly known commodity, the SEU, and talking about how the SEU fits into that would help us have kind of a solid point of reference. We know what the SEU does at this point. And then we have this goal, 50-50 by 2032, right? So what contribution does the SEU make to that? If we can begin to at least think about that, then everything that is not SEU, we begin to get a better handle on that too. So I'm thinking of this as just one way to engage this question of how do we get to 50-50 by 2032? So I do have that big picture in mind, but clearly the SEU is the point of reference that we use to talk about it.
Just to remember history, as I recall, it doesn't mean we have to stay there, but we started the conversation about the advisory board having a public hearing, not the SEU, which is again different. And it may be that we can do all of those if we're talking about a bigger event in which you have a slotted time for the SEU advisory board to, as opposed to having it all try to collapse into 1 hour or 2 hour slot. I mean,
well, the reason that I'd asked something about the timing on the CEP was that I thought that would be context
Yes,
for it, but I
it
do
would.
think it should be an SEU, we should focus, it's an SEU advisory board event, and it should be to advise the advisory board, the public, or other people, and focusing on what the SEU can do within that. And I was only suggesting for timing, it would be useful to have it occur after you've posted the comprehensive energy plan on the website, so people also know what that is. That's all I was suggesting.
All right, okay.
Not that we talk about the comprehensive, but that people would have that as information for a context for it. But I think the focus should be, if we're going to do it, it should be an advisory board event, and we should focus on not evaluating the SEU the way we're doing here in that role that we have to play, but getting some input on, where does it fit within this larger context, and what can the SEU do?
So Larry, does this mean you're going to convene a group to further refine which direction this is going to be headed in?
Right, and to that end, I'd like to ask two questions. Of course, who on the advisory board is interested, but also how do people feel about other organizations that have an interest in energy issues in the district also participating with us and shaping out this program? And I'm talking about groups such as Interfaith Power and Light, Washington Interfaith Network, the Tenants Association, AOBA, Federation of Civic and Citizens Associations.
They should all be invited to participate in the event.
Well, I'm wondering, to what extent do we want to engage them in helping to plan it and think about it?
Well, my reaction is that it's
Too much.
really, it's
Take
our,
too many cooks
it's
in
Yeah,
our
it's too much.
event, and they could all be invited to participate and
all
offer
be invited to
comments.
make presentations, and all be sent some general background information, etc., so they come informed, and maybe start it with a presentation about what the SEU, has done, the history, where we are, what we're supposed to be doing, and that there's also that, and then get their input. I would want the input from those groups to be at the event.
Right.
Okay.
So Larry, can you?
I'm interested in.
All right, John.
Yeah, I'm interested in,
The DDO will be there.
Yes.
Definitely got to work with you
And
guys.
so you work with Lenore to set up a time and date for that meeting.
Okay.
Shortly.
Yeah.
Because I know you wanted to originally have the meeting on the 28th. Obviously, that's not possible. Let's not wait till August.
Right.
At the same time. All right.
But I do think it's important to have the CEP out for context. I agree.
Lance,
I think that was
have that on the website for public comment.
I would say mid-June, because we still need to have a second meeting.
So we will
So
probably
we could be looking at-
schedule the advisory board meeting to kind of refine this in the next couple of weeks if you
Yeah.
work with Lenore to get that done.
Yeah.
We're slated to have the CEP out for public comment mid-June, so I can see having this
End of
public
June,
meeting at some.
mid-July.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Just a heads up, we'll be having hearings on the undergrounding plan the last 2 weeks of July.
So we know that.
Could you send us a copy of that, when you send out the CEP?
Certainly, but once it goes on the website, we can send it out to the board too.
that would be helpful, so we'll know.
Yeah, just send a notice that it's up.
I think
Right.
Dan was trying to do some part of your comment about the mayor. And the podium is to thank Terry and Tetra Tech and all the team members for a fantastic presentation. It's like herding cats here, and you did a really nice job. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Are there any new matters? Okay, hearing none, thanks folks, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
All right.
Went to the wrong building.
I know.
Sorry about that.
These minutes are on the website. Cutting down.
Is that right? We were just trying, so good to see you.
I can't believe I logged this smart meeting. Yesterday, I went to the microphone workshop, and there was this whole, bag of stuff. I took everything out and kept this.